Hey everyone, NoVa here with another video, this time with my mid-season update for ESEA Main. Sorry that this took a bit longer than mid-season to come out, but I've been super busy juggling college and my own team. However, I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. If you do enjoy this kind of content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at Nova__CSGO and CounterNature, who hosts my opinions on their site at CounterNature. Without further ado, let's get into my top 10 currently for this season of ESEA Main. Starting off the list, Cohesive Concepts, now called CohesioN, has done incredibly well thus far in the season, as the last undefeated team in Maine. Not only do they boast solid wins against the division's top teams, but also over multiple advanced and MDL teams through the FPL Cups. I don't know what is propelling them forward through these games, but if they keep it up, they are very likely to be in contention for the winner of Maine by the end of the season. ryder Esports, now going by a name that I actually can't say because I have family that watches my videos, were in heavy contention to take the top spot on my list had they not lost to CohesioN the other day. It was a pretty close game, which confirms my belief even further that these guys are going to be a hard team to beat, even for other top 10 teams. They aren't invincible though, as they've had quite a few really close wins, whereas CohesioN has been keeping their wins mostly clean. They're no longer undefeated, so I'm curious whether they'll be able to bounce back in their next match, or if their first loss to CohesioN will act as the first domino in a falling chain of losses. After a series of controversial roster moves, kicking both Spear and Arctos after their first loss as a team, Step Out the Stargate have elected to bring in both Xailor and Ecstasy in their place. They've only played one game since then, up against the previously 7-1 Cat Jam team, but the new players seemed right at home as they stepped into a quick 16-8 win. I desperately want to see how much damage this team can do against either of the current top two, but we'll have to wait until later this week to see that. One of the predictions I made preseason that actually came true was the damage that this team would be able to make. X Voltage Esports, now sponsored by Valkyrie, has been pretty damn solid after some scary games in week 1. They've just taken on their first two losses, both being incredibly close to very strong teams. Interestingly, their loss is what's pushing them into my fourth spot, as it was a nail-bitingly close 16-13 to X Ryder, providing further proof that that team has cracks in their armor. Their other loss came at the hands of UGK, who will be featured further down the list. All in all, having already played one of the top 3 teams and not slated to play the other two in the next week, this is Valkyrie's time to further bolster their win-loss record. All I'm saying is that Valkyrie's last main roster made advanced, and this one is primed to do the same. STFU's placement is my first major break from the current ESEA standings, but I truly think that these guys deserve to round out my top 5. Watching them bring the fight to X Ryder was very impressive, and though they didn't manage to close it out in the end, they brought it all the way to OT. They're improving game by game, and have rebounded well from their 2 losses. They can look forward to some relatively lighter teams, and much like Valkyrie, should use them as an opportunity to lock themselves into the 32-team playoffs. My 6th place spot features the current 4th place team in ESEA, retired CSGO Boomers. I'm honestly not quite sure where these guys stand in the top 10. If I waited another week to consider games played, I'd be able to judge how they performed against CohesioN, which would help me slot them in better, but as of yet they haven't had to play against any of the teams I've mentioned above. So even though they've only lost one game, with 8 wins under their belt, I can't quite put them in my top 5. I look forward to seeing how they deal with CohesioN though. Next up is one of the few one-loss teams left in the division, HighQ. Another roster which ranked pretty well on my original list. I expected a lot from this team, and they have thus far delivered. Their 7th win came at the hands of a forfeit by Atheris, but even without the FFW, I think that they've done really well to keep their games clean after an early season slip-up to medium chillin'. Their next 3 games will be very telling, but if they can pull through unscathed, I believe the sky's the limit for this roster. Look for how they perform against Team Villainous next week. Up next is Hibu's team, previously known as Atlas Esports, now called Synergy. I'm going to be completely honest, 3 of the last 4 teams in my top 10 here have done the exact opposite of keeping their games clean. Looking at Synergy's match history scares me. It features game after game of 16-13s, 16-14s, and OTs. However, credit where credit is due, they had a genuine shot at beating CohesioN, which not many teams can say. And even if their wins were close, the W is what matters, and they did get them. Of their next 2 games, I'm interested to see how Rectify manages against them. Team Villainous Academy is currently 7-2 on the season, but have yet to play any super solid competition as a probable result of their 0-2 start to the season. I believe that they can win against tougher opposition, but since they have yet to be able to prove it, I've opted to leave them on the lower end of the top 10. Rounding out my top 10 is my previous 4th place team, UGK Esports. While I have a minute, I also want to shout out Kates on this team because I forgot to do so in my players to watch video. That dude is nuts. Anyway, back to the rankings. This team has quite a few convincing wins under their belt, and a close win over Valkyrie, which on its own would push them even beyond 10th place. However, an unfortunate loss to Nocturne's chess class has grounded them back down to 10th place. Not that Nocturne's team hasn't been performing this season, of course, but UGK has much tougher competition in their next 3 games, having to face both of the top 2 next week. I'm really interested to see if they can bring the fight to either of them. Now I'm going to quickly discuss some other teams who may be in ESEA's top 10 or are close to it, but didn't quite make the cut in my list, and why. I'll try to keep these brief. Hostile Actions was actually placed in my 9th slot, but having lost both Kermi and Florence out of nowhere after I had already written my script, I needed to go back in and adjust everything. I wouldn't say that the new roster is a downgrade, but I am leaving a section on them in the video regardless because they were in my top 10 before the changes were made. I'm wondering whether they'll be able to bounce back this late in the season with 2 new players. I'm happily surprised to see the team formerly known as RIT, now called BRIC, performing well without Farrell, who left for an advanced team. Currently in 9th place on ESEA standings, this team has the same issue as Villainous for me, in that because they have yet to play against any of the higher teams in the division, I don't have a great read on them. They have Hostile Actions to beat next week though, so let's see how they do there. The last ESEA top 10 team that didn't make my personal top 10 is BoomerPooperSuperTrooper. Don't let their bizarre name fool you though, this team has some serious skill backing them up. Preseason I felt that they would fail to perform without their best player, the previously unknown turned MDL player Eric, but they seem to be doing quite well without him. They have some tough games coming up, but have had a relatively easier season thus far, so I decided to leave them out of my top 10. One last note about another team, the Walmart door greeters have completely overhauled their roster, which now features some much bigger names than before, including some players with advanced and even MDL experience. I think that they should do very well as the season enters its late stages. So that's my top 10. Remember that this is all my opinion, as always, and that I am very capable of being wrong, as I was a lot in the preseason rankings. With this list, I wanted to focus more on proven teams, as if they've shown they could get close against CohesioN or ryder, they're probably pretty good. If you want to know which storylines to look for the remainder of the season of Main, I'm personally interested to see if CohesioN can complete their flawless run, and if anyone can catch up to them. If you've made it this far, you've probably enjoyed the video to some extent, so I would recommend checking out CounterNature, as they host a ton more content focused on the lower tiers of CS. I also plan to keep making more like this as long as people want it, so please follow me at NoVa__CSGO and CounterNature at CounterNature on Twitter to show you like the video and to keep up to date on more content like this in the future. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.